Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. 感谢大家光临由醉花林俱乐部和武吉布朗学会联合举办的武吉布朗一周展览系列讲座开幕典礼。Thank you for your presence for the opening ceremony, BUKIT BROWN exhibition and talks, co-organized by Chui Club and all things BUKIT BROWN. 我们的主宾、主席和嘉宾已经来到了现场。Let's welcome the guest of honor tonight, Madam Jean Ittogi Shanmugaratnam. She is the chair, Singapore Art Museum Board.
I have been grappling for the last few weeks after Mr. Chui invited me with the speech that I was going to do. I am no expert on BUKIT BROWN, and having travelled BUKIT BROWN and listened to Raymond Bo and all the other brownies, as somebody said to me after he had gone to BUKIT BROWN, well actually the chair of the National Heritage Board, and he said he had never met so many professors, so many PhDs, so many intellectuals, so many historians in one square mile. And so I'm humbled to be before you. It's very difficult, as you know, to be before experts. So I want to give you a street person's view of BUKIT BROWN. I'm speaking to you as a street level person. Good evening, Dr. Hua. Thank you for inviting me. And now I need to put myself in the right place. So please, as I speak, please note that I'm no expert. Now, what is BUKIT BROWN to someone like me? It strikes me at three levels, BUKIT BROWN. First of all, its enormous size and location. I'll come back to that, but you know, for an island, our dimensions, it is huge, and it almost sits at the heart of the island. Secondly, it is the resting place of the Chinese community. Thirdly, the Chinese community element, I understand, is being honored tonight, but it will pose several dimensions that people who care to protect the space will have to address. Thirdly, what is the value of a place that we call a cemetery with however many gravestones and how many important people that were buried there? So those are the three aspects that as a street person I want to address with you tonight. Now, how does one approach those three issues? One must have some framing, obviously, as to what one thinks heritage is. Well, I've been thinking hard about it, and I think the best one-line definition that one can come up with is that it must be something that is integral to one's identity. It cannot be interesting, it cannot be nice to have, as in urban speak. It must be must-have because it is integral to our identity. Now, secondly, in framing this issue of what is heritage in our context, we are a multiracial, multi-religious, and a little bit more, I don't quite have the word for it, I don't know if you have the word for it. We are from many different countries and at different times. Now that implies something very, very complex because it means not just a different set of beliefs, but a different set of values, because values also change within one culture, and different sense of aesthetics. So there are many dimensional implications in the complexity of our national makeup. So then, BUKIT BROWN. Is this a heritage site that has to do with collective memory? First, back to BUKIT BROWN at the ground level. First, its size, as I said. BUKIT BROWN is precious, I think, precisely because of its size and location. It is, as all of you who are experts on your all things BUKIT BROWN site have spoken, I've seen varying numbers from 200,000 to 100,000 gravestones. But anyway, we know the number is phenomenal. Secondly, the size is unique for a country like ours. So first of all, the size gives it its monumentality and its importance. But as I hinted at earlier, the size is also a very big problem for, I think, those who are as advocates. Because why? Because in a country like ours, when we're talking about something with this kind of size, a heritage issue becomes pushed onto the Dutching, if you like, of economic value and its cost. I mean, it's something that you all know, but it's worth bearing that in mind. The second aspect is Chineseness. Why is that a problem? Last night I was at a dinner and coincidentally somebody asked me, well, since you're so interested in art, why don't we talk about Bukit Brown? So I said, well, okay, what do you want to say about it? And somebody was joking. I said, well, it was all Chinese. And somebody said, no, there are also 2 Indians there. And I said, yeah, 2 petrified Indians. Now that is an important symbolic statement because the Chineseness of Bukit Brown, does it trouble us? I don't know, but it's something that one must be extremely explicitly aware of. Because why? Because of its Chineseness, it pushes us back again to that national calculus I was talking about, which is not just economic cost because of its size and therefore, what is its economic value, but also because of its Chineseness, we are pushed onto another terrain, which is what is the value nationally to the national heritage. Third issue then is the one that I'm sure we all think may address the first 2 issues, which is the value of Bukit Brown. First of all, the material world that is Bukit Brown is clearly a very interesting place. If we just talk about nature, when we did the walk, we were accompanied by some experts on nature, and I was told something almost esoteric about how it was such a large space that some of the jungle animals that had been pushed out of the heart of the jungle across the street were now seeking refuge in Bukit Brown. Now that seems okay. I mean, if it's important, we need to know a lot more about why it is important for the ecosystem of a country, like the size of Singapore. Secondly, of course, the number of gravestones, and as the speakers before me said, it records a very important period in the history of the Chinese community. Let me try my hand as a non-expert at looking at what we call the value of Bukit Brown. I just went to China and I went to visit, as I always do, the contemporary art museums, the history museums, and the modern art museums. And at one fanciful place, the young guy, director of contemporary art space, invited me to lunch. And he was talking about Chinese art, and I asked him, what is your sense of Singaporeans as Chinese? And he thought for a long, long time, and I think he was trying to be polite because I don't think he knew a single Singapore artist, forgive me, Kachan. And then he said, I think you all are very deep people because you have suffered a lot. Now actually that's a very interesting way of seeing the overseas Chinese. He said, I think your history is about suffering. And I thought, well, what an interesting perspective, because here we are in a little bit of hubris, feeling, we are a jewel in the Pacific Ocean. But the mother source of where many have come from saw the early Chinese that left the country as people who were, how would we put it, able to withstand adversity because had been subject or had experienced a lot of suffering. Now, why is that relevant to Bukit Brown? Let's look at the period that Bukit Brown is about. Bukit Brown, for someone like me, a non-historian, please correct me if I'm right, shines the light on 2 countries at 2 slightly different periods of time. China at the end of the 1800s and Singapore at the turn of the century in the early 1900s. If we think about China at the end of the 1800s, what was it? The Qing dynasty was coming to its end. I mean, we had lost legitimacy, you had many new political movements, you had foreign powers cutting up what was called the Chinese melon. So you had a lot of instability and people had difficulty, I think, finding means of survival. That's one. And so it wasn't when people left from China to come to Nanyang, they were not coming because they were politically persecuted, but they were coming for economic survival reasons. Now, is that relevant to us as we view Bukit Brown? So they came to Singapore around the period and at the turn of the century, the 1900s. Singapore was not then a political entity. We didn't have the history of China. China was, as we said, already becoming what we call today a failed state. Singapore was not yet a political entity. It was a place of great opportunity, of people coming in and out. It wasn't yet as thriving as the 1920s, but at the turn in the 1900s, if you look at the population numbers, there were already quite a big group of people coming in from quite various sources. But of course, I think around, 1910 or whatever, the Chinese immigrant just tipped the scale of being the largest immigrant community here. Now, is that important? Huge diaspora out of a very important country in the world today in a period of instability in both the source and the settled country. Is it of importance? I think so. And why is that the case? For those of us who care about Chinese antiquity, I need to connect with something very far. If you're interested in Chinese antiquity and Chinese ancient art, most of the evidence that we get of the stories of the past come from objects that were buried with important people. So now what are we connecting? Burial practices of the Chinese. And why is that important? Until today, I understand, we don't know really, what's the term for it, the Chinese concept of spirituality. There is debate. If you read literature until today, there is a belief that the West could become, I don't know, maybe more spiritual, more scientific, because there was a dichotomy between mind and body. Once there was what was called a theory of the mind, where the mind could develop separately from the body, then you could infuse a lot of meaning into human experience. There was a belief for a long time that the Chinese never had that dualism. And so recently there's been a lot of discussion because of the speech. I had to do so much research, Casey. You can see how much research I had to do. And there's a lot of discussion on what the sin meant in Chinese, and the evolution of Chinese literature and ancient Chinese writings as recorded the funerary objects, and of course in the writings. And well, if you want to know, the Taiwan National Palace Museum had a whole set of recordings of all the references to the word sin. And this scholar from British Columbia University did a computer program, and he looked at all the references to the word sin, and he said, look, the Chinese also at different times began to see a separation between the body and the mind, and the sin began to mean heart, mind, and perhaps later heart, soul. That's one area of study that should interest us. And it's so new, that's one. There's another area of study which I just chanced upon because of this speech, which was something called, I don't know if you know, something called the Han and the Po. Raymond, you heard of it? Raymond would be the expert. That human beings in the Chinese believe that at one time of its long history, that there were two aspects to the soul. The Po, which animates the human body as it is alive, and at the point of death, the second spirit called the Han leaves the body and ascends to the celestial heavens. And why are funerary objects becoming back now to Bukit Brown so important? Because the ancient Chinese believed that they had to find a way to let the Han spirit find its way to the heavens. And so the funerary objects were all kinds of vehicles to help the body in the spirit in that journey. I don't know if that's right, but that's what I've read. And graveyards and gravestones. Now we're getting very close to Bukit Brown. That a lot of the designs of graveyards and gravestones had to do with creating a spiritual path, also for the ascension of the Huns, H-U-N, not the Chinese Han, not Attila the Han, but it's spelled H-U-N, the H-U-N. Because I don't speak Chinese, I can only give you the English one. And so now these things I have never heard of. I don't know how many of you have heard of it. I don't know if that's settled scholarship, but it is fascinating. It is fascinating that so much of something that you imagine is so central to the being of the Chinese people that is not settled. And here we are, we have a material world in front of us. I don't know whether it leads us close enough to these questions, but there's certainly continuous heritage from that time. And I wonder if this might help us thinking about the valley. And so these questions, I think, while not directly pertinent to your work, I think give us guiding points as to why there should be a wonderment, there should be an investment of study and time in seeing what connects with what. Because all these points that we should be connecting are not even settled. And so why do we think that we are in a position to destroy a material heritage that, as I said, may or may not be considered? So we all know that in a country like ours, we have to make choices, and it's very difficult, I think, before with the choice that faces us, because of the 3 points that I have raised, and I just want to summarize that again. The first is the size of Bukit Brown. It is so large that the case, I think, is so difficult. And that's all I can say at this moment. How do you then lower the cost of, if people did want to preserve the site or to keep it long, how does one lower the cost? Now, it comes to the second point. How do you make Bukit Brown less Chinese? Should you make it less Chinese? I don't know. But as a Singaporean, I'm uncomfortable about it, and I hope that we will discuss it and find ways and means of it. As you speak of its heritage value, you would place it within the national consciousness. Of course, there's room for the Chinese, Malay, and Indian, because truly there were different sources of our society. But at the moment now, when the cost is so overbearing, your case is a little bit difficult to make, and so the universal, the national, and even the universal interest of Bukit Brown, I think there's some way to go there. And the issues that I touched on, spirituality of a big nation is of universal importance. So I just wanted to say it. Now, I was invited, I was told, because I could speak Chinese, Teochew. So where is the Teochew, you might ask? So I'm going to recite a poem, which I think is relevant. Okay? We may need a translator, I don't know. And I have a very strong Teochew speaking, English speaking. Kacang? Okay, many of you are Teochew here? Or am I wasting? What am I still going to say? Pearls? Am I wasting pearls or wisdom? Okay, here goes a Teochew. This is a Teochew poem from the very generation of people, I think, who are buried at Bukit Brown. And I'm sure many of you know this. It starts, Ting Jitya Te. Anybody know what it means? In the skies there is a star. The air Kui Zhe. That means in school, like on land, on earth, a school is there. Zhe Meng Wei Kui. That means the school's doors are not yet open. Ano Kao Jia Yu Chui. I bet nobody knows what Yu Chui is. Ano is a loving reference for a child. Is calling out to drink something. I don't know if anybody knows what Yu Chui means. And then the next line, Yu Chui A Wei Guat. That means it must be a plant because it hasn't been harvested. Ano Kao Jia Huang Guat. There's yet another kind of plant, right? And then Huang Guat A Wei Liu. So it's from the ground. So first is from the tree, second is from the ground. Hasn't been dug out. Ano Kao Jia Lao Ya Jing Ju. That means Christ calls out for the Buddha's one glass of beer. And I won't go on from there because it gets blasphemous. Okay. Now, why is it relevant? I think the work that you have done, people like Raymond, and who are called the Brownies, it's not an adequate description for you all. What you have done is like placing. Somebody told me when we went to Bukit Brown that the old name for Singapore was it New Star? Was it New Star? Okay, it's just like that. That I think with the work you've done, indeed, there is a star in the sky, and the interest that you have caused, indeed, is like a school that's there now because everybody now knows about it. But the doors of the school not yet open.
Madam Jean for her impressive speech. 感谢尚达曼夫人给我们带来的精彩致辞。